Hey there, welcome to today's episode. We're going to be taking a look at the sampler on the MPC. In the previous episode, we looked at the hardware required, so audio interfaces, cables, phono preamps, and now that we've got an audio signal coming through, we want to capture that using the sampler. The sampler is this little turntable icon that you will find in your menu, unless you've moved it over like I have and made it a permanent shortcut on my homepage. Now, why would I do that? If you notice, on a drum track, you can actually access the sampler here. And if I access it here, or here, it's always the same sampler. Again, just for the beginners, it's not a different sampling page, it's always the same. But I can access it in two different places. So why do I need the shortcut if I can access it from different types of tracks? Your drum tracks, I think with your key group, you also get the same options. It's simply because when you've loaded up a sample to your pads, certainly on a drum track, you will notice we get this audio waveform instead. So if I've loaded up all 16 of these pads, because an empty one will still show me this information, but if all 16 were filled up with samples, I'm no longer going to be able to see those options. So I just like having it here as a quick shortcut that I can open up and get straight to the sampler. You will find on some MPCs, you have a dedicated hardware sampling button, or certainly a shift and another button will take you to the sampler. It will say underneath the button in text for whatever it is on your MPC. So multiple ways to get there, but it's always the same sampler, and it looks like this. We're going to start by talking about input signals because we're just getting this thing set up. So your device probably has a volume control. The iPad certainly does, but whether it's an old synth or something, you'll be able to adjust the volume. For an iPad, typically, I will just turn the volume to max. And then if I press this, you won't hear anything. We can see my input signal coming in. I want it nice and loud. I don't want it too loud because if we use our gain, and this is how you can control it, you could turn it up to max volume on the device and then use the little gain knob on the back of the MPC. There'll be some kind of rotary encoder you can turn. But if I crank mine up, you'll notice this signal is way too hot now. It's all going to be distorted. If we had the monitor on, it would sound terrible. You can see because we're hitting and clipping out at red. So that's too loud. And obviously, if I crank this all the way back down the other way, we get nothing. And then we get just like a really low signal. What you can do as well, if you started clipping out and you're just checking this, you'll notice the little clipping meter stays kind of at the top. If you tap that, you can reset it and then just double check your levels as you come in. Now, I'm going to keep it low for a second. The reason for that being is I want to talk about this little slider here, which I think a lot of people as new users think that's going to be the volume control for the input signal. But as we know, it's on the hardware itself. As we change this, this is the threshold. So if I set this around here and I have a low input signal, essentially it will not begin recording until it goes past. You'll notice this is kind of like an arrow shape, which means it's waiting for something to go past. So my volume level at the moment, that's not coming past. If I hit record, try to record this as a sample, it wouldn't begin recording. It has to go louder than this little arrow. So it has to go past that arrow in order to begin recording. So if I crank up my gain again, and I moved it to anywhere where it's starting to go past this arrow, anywhere here, if I hit record and now play my signal coming in from whatever source, it's going to begin recording because it's moved past the threshold. Hope that makes sense. Typically, I keep mine quite low because really most of the time I do want it to start recording straight away. If you set it to 0, then it's always going to record instantly. But usually I give it a little bit of wiggle room. If you need to, you can set it high so that you could bypass a quiet part in a sample, and it's only going to begin recording once it reaches a certain part in that sample where everything gets louder. It's a way to have flexibility and control. But that is your threshold slider. So the next thing, input. We know that we've got a signal because we can see it, and I'm going to dial mine into probably around there. I want a decent, healthy signal, not too loud so that it's clipping, not too quiet so that I have to keep normalizing and bringing the volume up all the time. You know you've got the correct input because you can see the signal, but let's say you've got an MPC with multiple inputs like mine. If I move over, I've got 3 and 4. If I'm hitting this, you'll notice I get nothing. So just be mindful of your inputs. If you've only got one set of inputs, then it's going to be easy. But if you've got multiple and you're not getting any audio, it could be this. You'll also notice we're not hearing anything because we haven't turned our monitor on. If I go down to the bottom here and I turn this to in and I set it back to 1 and 2, which are my main inputs, you'll notice we suddenly have audio. So just keep those two things in mind. Generally, if you're having problems, you can't hear anything, it could be the gain, could be your inputs. Actually, it's 3 things, but also it could be your monitor as well, just isn't turned on. So between those 3 things, you should be able to solve the issue. We have our little boxes. We know with a red rectangle, we can double tap or open this up for more options. This is the input selection. So depending on your MPC, you can choose. and we can choose stereo inputs 1 and 2. In my case, I've got extra 3 and 4, but I could also choose an individual channel, so just input 1 or 2, left or right. Useful if you've got a sample and all the drums are panned to the left, you just want to record the left channel, you can do that. It's the same underneath where we have options between stereo and mono. Typically, stereo is what I use, but if there's a record, a sample, something's panned hard to one side and I just want to bring everything into the middle, I can sum that recording by just making a mono recording. In the olden days, it used to be more of a limitation on the MPCs where you could record for longer in mono and less in stereo. But with these modern ones, you don't really need to worry about that too much. So it's more for practical use. Another thing just quickly in this menu, if you need to do some resampling, that's how you choose resampling, left and right. Or again, you can choose a specific channel. I'm going to cover resampling in another episode because it's really fun with the MPC. But no, that's how you access it through this menu. Just make sure if you've moved to resampling, you move back when you want to use your input signal. So staying with the input, we've now got audio. If I wanted to, I can apply an effect in here. So you can apply up to 4 effects. We're not going to do that because that's going to be another separate episode. I'm going to close that down. But there's some really cool things because anything you can apply some distortion, saturation to that input signal as it's being recorded. A cool one is if you've got a guitar, this has a bunch of amp sims. So if you plug your guitar in, start playing, you can use the amp sim effects at the same time and record all of that and then chop it up and do stuff. So we've got our effects section. Over here is the length of the sample that you capture, and it's connected to this little box down the bottom. It's got an orange square around it, which means it's linked to the Q links, but also if you just tap on it, you can use the encoder as well. And you're setting the amount of time you want to record for. By default, I think when you buy one of these, it gives you a very small amount. It gives you like 20 seconds. Now, I keep mine around 5 minutes. I don't tend to sample for longer than 5 minutes, but I could crank this up to whatever. I don't know what the limit is, but I know it's pretty long. You can record for a long time. But I keep mine around 5 minutes. But if you've only got like the 20 seconds, come in here and dial this up so that you can get some half decent long samples. As we start recording, this will just tell us for how long we've been recording. We'll do that in a second. We'll do just a little example of it. The arm button, of course, is to start recording. We've got some tabs at the bottom. I'm going to cover those in other episodes. We're just going to leave it on basic sampling. That means we're kind of recording and we're stopping recording. But you do have some options. You can slice the input signal as it's coming in, different ways to kind of start off the recording. I'll do that in a different episode so that it doesn't get too long. Over here, we have a tuning fork. So as I'm playing around, this is a C note on this synth app. So I expect to see C, which popped up there. If I hold it a bit longer, you will see. And if I change, we're now getting a D. So it's a tuner. You can tune something coming in, which is pretty cool. If we take a look over here, this is for key groups. And again, I'm going to go further into that in another episode, but it's for setting up a key group type of track with the recording that you make. So for now, let's just do a very basic recording so that we can finish off this episode. In order to do that, obviously, you need to make sure your input signal is nice and healthy. We want to make sure the threshold is good so that it's going to exceed the threshold. And we're just going to press record and begin. Now you'll notice nothing's happening because we haven't exceeded the threshold yet. But as soon as I press some keys, like that, begins recording, I can press stop, and then I've got a couple of options here. The first one being to name it. So if this was a bit of a piano sound, I could label it as piano so that it's going to be easy to find inside of the MPC. And you'll notice there's a couple of other options, things that we'll go through in further episodes, because then we can get into how it's loaded into the sample pool, how you can slice it up and that type of thing. But if I do say keep, it is going to load it into that sample pool, and there's already an episode about the sample pool if you're not familiar with that. But some basic options, we can play the sample back just if we want to check it again. We can discard, which we're going to do because we don't need to keep this. We can save it, and we can edit it, so we could jump straight over to the editor. But for now, I'm going to discard, and I'm going to leave it there for this episode. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.